Well, the thing I've already learned today is that if triathlon doesn't work out, you always have a second field in technology. You're going to be one of the... You could work over at Geek Squad or something, man.
Seriously, I think I peaked right then. And if it, listen, if the last 53 minutes doesn't tell you how bad and how much I love doing this podcast, then nothing will. Yeah, I have been troubleshooting the last 50 minutes to try and get some equipment fixed and dialed in and troubleshooting the problem. But I mean, to be honest, I can only imagine you on the other end. Because you probably would have figured this out in like 30 seconds, but you're not here. But here I am. But yeah, was able to make it work.
I was impressed. You must be meditating a little bit because I asked your frustration level. You actually said 8.5 to 10. So there's at least an 8.5 in there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling pretty zen today. So, but yeah, we're here. We're ready. It'll be a little bit of a power cast because now I'm on a little bit of a time crunch, but it's August 13th, the year 2024. Welcome aboard, everybody. You're listening to Crushing Iron Podcast. This is episode 788.
Yeah. And before we get rolling, can I just throw a quick shout out to our boy CC, the original Corey Coggins?
Shout it out, man.
He just finished the mountain bike, Leadville 100 mountain bike race.
No way.
Yeah. 10 hours and, he came in ahead of Lance Armstrong.
Well, that's what happens when Lance stops doping. He's the back of the packer.
No, I think he really did. I mean, I think it was the real Lance from.
That's a solid 10 hours. He got the big belt buckle then.
Oh, he did. He got a shiny old, but he sent it to me. It was really pretty.
That a boy. Yes, congratulations. That a boy. I know he's been doing a lot of mountain biking.
Race across the sky, baby.
Man, nicely done. Nicely done, CC. But I'm going to get right into the thick of things today. We got a huge week, and today, because of technical difficulties, a little bit of a shorter podcast, but appreciate you tuning in today. Looking forward to seeing a lot of you at Ironman Louisville 70.3 this weekend. Come say hi, shake hands, wave, give hugs, pats on the back. There'll be a lot of C26ers in town. I think we got 70 or 80, if not more, with relays combined, so it's going to be an awesome time in a city that brings back a lot of memories for me, both good and bad. Having been, I think it was my last Ironman as an alcoholic and my first one back sober. So I got a lot of great memories there, and just looking forward to soaking in the town and enjoying all things downtown Louisville. But
yeah, if you one quick thing, if you I won't be there, so if you run into Coach Glenn down there and ask him where Mike is, he'll give you $1 bill.
Oh. And believe me, now that Coach Glenn is retired, he is slinging those singles like crazy, baby. He is spending that 401k. So exactly, if you see Coach Glenn, ask him what a 4x8 interval is, and or where Mike is, and he'll give you $1.
High cadence or big gear? Just give him that question.
Exactly, high cadence or big gear all day long. Well, that's kind of been our topic today, our short and sweet. But I went over this in our Zoom call yesterday, and it got me thinking, like watching the Olympics and watching athletes train. And I think to keep it short and sweet today, I wanted to talk about the difference in how athletes view intensity and how to approach your intervals, how to approach looking at a week. And I think sometimes just the nuance that coaches have when they look at programming your week, whether it's with intervals or whether it's with lengthening things. But then also, I think, and more importantly, the general, it's not the misinformation. It's, I think, just a misunderstanding of the big picture when athletes look at weeks and look at volume. And there's always this, there tends to be two camps in training, right? It tends to be the quality versus quantity, or the quantity versus quality. And people really entrench themselves in this camp. I just don't have time. I'm a quality guy. I don't do junk miles. And you got people who are like, I'm very polarized. I do a ton of volume, 80, 90%, really, really easy. And then 5 to 20% really, really hard, depending on the time of year. And, generally speaking, that is where the research lies. It's in, but again, they research, they're not going to pick out the back of the pack athletes from Ironman Louisville or Muncie or Chattanooga or Wisconsin. They gather this information from high level athletes, experienced athletes, cross country skiers, cyclists, triathletes, runners, mostly runners, cyclists, and cross country skiers, and they look at how these professionals train, like these high level athletes. And again, that's the biggest bang for your buck is, in my opinion, when I say biggest bang for your buck, I also mean the safest thing to do is volume, right? It's easy. Volume is the greatest way to get the adaptation that you need. But as age groupers, that's not always the case. And so I think I wanted to kind of quickly discuss today two different not models, but two different things to focus on and really kind of understand when you look at what your weekly layout is, whether it's you're a coached athlete or you're a coach yourself, or you're working up a training plan, or you're just a self-coach athlete, just kind of winging it, is how we look at how we view intensity. And I think the definition, or how most triathletes view intensity equals quality, right? And then quantity is seen as volume. And why I can understand that, I think, and I've mentioned this before on quite a few podcasts that we've done, that I'm in no way, shape, or form a fan of the training stress, the training stress score in Training Peaks, TSS. I understand and I support their effort in trying to quantify the stress of a specific session. I just don't agree with, one, their formula, nor do I agree with the lack of compounding effect of 2 sessions done in a day, or even an AM and PM done, or a PM and AM done session the night before or the day before, or if it's done in heat, or if it's done inside, or if it's done back to back, so, and how you've recovered. So I think to me, all those things play a part in increasing a score rather than just looking at each individual workout as itself. But going back to TSS and the training stress score and how you might see a raised level of intensity over the week is, so if I said, Mike, let's say Mike's been doing, I'm coaching you, and I've been having you do a bunch of 2-hour rides with some intensity, right? Banging it out. This is kind of your bread and butter, right? You like to go shorter. You like to be a little more intense. You're not a giant volume guy. So I'm giving you these 2.5-hour rides, and they got a lot of quality work in them, quote unquote quality work, right? Which is just intensity intervals, zone 3 and higher. And then the next weekend, I give you a 4-hour ride. Okay. Well, first off, you'd be like, dude, I'm not doing that. But 2, most athletes, exactly. Most athletes say, like, hey, dude, why the jump? Why the jump in quote unquote volume, right? Volume is in time, right? And I think that what a lot of athletes don't understand too is that there's also a way to manipulate volume. You can look at volume each week as volume of time, but you can also look at it as volume as the amount of intensity you're getting each week. And so for me as a coach, like when I look at that and I say, all right, Mike, you've done a lot of 2.5-hour rides. You've got those on your belt. They're pretty intense. Well, instead of giving you a 3 to 3.5-hour ride, I'm going to give you a 4-hour easy ride that's actually going to benefit you in a different way, right? It's going to work a totally different system. You're going to get a little more time in the saddle. But the chances are is that it's going to create, depending on how you ride it and train, it's going to create a very, very similar training stress score than a 2.5 to 2 hour and 45-minute ride would have done. But you see that the thing with athletes too is we see added time, and we see this increased level of volume because we think of volume as in time. And a lot of athletes, and I had this, I mentioned this yesterday in my weekly Zoom calls, I had an athlete that I jumped up from 2 hours hard to a 4-hour easy. And they're like, dude, what are you doing for 4 hours? Like, why am I doing that? I can't go that far. And I'm like, well, you can. You've been doing these 2 hours, 215 hard rides. If I had given you a 2.5-hour hard ride, would you have said anything? And they're like, no, because it's only 2.5 hours. But what they're looking at is 2.5 hours of time, not time plus intensity, which is how you get stress. So this is just a longer time, but a lower intensity to equal the same number. And so again, I just think it's important for athletes to understand and realize that, and I do this sometimes as a coach, I might give somebody an hour and a half, hour and 45-minute harder, quote unquote, run with some intensity. And then next week, or maybe let's say been doing, hour and 25 minutes, hour and 30, hour and 35, hour and 40-minute runs, like real small increments of additional time. But also within that additional time, you're weaving in extra intensity. Maybe it goes up from 2 by 10 minutes at tempo, 3 by 10 minutes at tempo, and then you break it down to 4 times 6 or 7 minutes at threshold in the bulk of a long run of hour and 35 minutes. So you've taken them from gradually from a 120 to 135, super easy, super gradual from a quote unquote time/volume. But what you did is you had time and you added intensity. Well, you could easily ask that same person the next week, remove the intensity and say, now just go spend 2 hours on your feet super easy. And they might say, man, that feels like a big jump, right? Because again, you see time and you see time is always volume, not volume of intensity. But if you do a 2 hour run very, very easy, just time on your feet, maybe even hitting the trails, you might cover half mile, maybe a mile more than your hour and 35-minute, hour and 40-minute intensity run. But if I had just given you a bump up in mileage, you wouldn't have thinking of that much. So I just think it's an interesting thing to bring up for athletes to recognize and see, is that there's multiple ways to get an athlete to adapt to being fitter, right? Aerobic intensity is always going to be a great option. We don't always have that, but you can always lengthen or you can always shorten that intensity. And so I think when we get into this volume, quote unquote, I'm a volume guy. I'm like, what does he mean? Volume of what? Volume of time? Volume of intensity? Or is it the people who get into the camps of quantity versus quality or quality versus quantity? Quantity of what? Quantity of time, quantity of intensity, quantity of frequency. Like, I just think there's so many different ways we can play that. And I think intensity always has this zone 4, zone 5 track workout, TT effort, sweet spot, repeats. That's what people see. But you can also add intensity, right? The intense, because a 4 hour ride easy after 2 hours, 2:15 of intense work, after you hit 2:45, 3 hours, it's going to feel intense, right? It's a different kind of burn, making your legs spin the same cadence over and over and over again at the same speed or the same effort, the same watts for 4 hours versus having, again, changes of pace, right? You ask an athlete to do, go out and do 3 times 5 minutes at threshold with, 2 to 3 minutes easy recovery in between. It goes by fast. You got changes in cadence and changes in intensity, right? Not that bad. But a lot of times when you ask athletes, all right, go in, I want you to hold a set like an aerobic threshold workout, which I love, pretty set cadence, pretty set watt output for 65 minutes straight. That's really, really challenging. You have this muscular fatigue that that happens with your body and your pedal stroke because you're not used to doing same cadence, same effort, same watts, same speed, however you want to quantify it, for a long period of time with no breaks, right? So it's like taking an Ironman Wisconsin course versus an Ironman Florida course. And if you don't train for constant power and constant pedaling, it's a lot different than the uphill grind with me. I have Wisconsin and then a little bit of a downhill coasting. And so there's so many ways to manipulate, quote unquote, intensity, quote unquote, volume. And then the most important thing I think is just how you look at it within your week.
Well, yeah, you said it right there at the end. What I was going to say is that, you give me a 4 hour easy ride and my mind is like, this is intense, man. Mm-hmm. This is intense because I occasionally will do that. And because for me, when I'm going to do something like that, I really am thinking about fluid pedal stroke and just really kind of controlling my muscle. It's that, sort of easy, but it's just that consistency factor. And frankly, for someone who came not, I didn't do endurance sports growing up, and that's the sort of the missing link for me a lot of times is that I've never been good at, the zone 1, zone 2 stuff. Like when we went to ride the course this weekend and we were going to do 2 loops and I ended up like just saying I'm going to do 1 loop and I wanted to go out and just repeat some hills, like I just wanted to go thrash hills, and that's just sort of how I roll. And to me, that's, it's intense, but for whatever reason, it's something that comes easy to me. And like just the spinning out for a long time or even running. I mean, when I'm running long like that, I am just, if I try the, super slow, 2 hour run, I mean, those are just super tough for me because I'm always trying to find an easy my best run form that makes it feel easy, but it's the patience factor, man. And we know patience is so important in long course racing for everybody, but certainly for most people, because it's like, man, when you're in a race, you start that race and what's the goal is to be done, right? And so it's just, for me, it's always been difficult to flip that switch and understand. But as you know, it's like the key. It's like, it's the foundation, the underlying key of everything. If you can kind of get good at that, then, we want to be fast and top end fast all the time, but the ability to hold on and be strong over a long period of time is so crucial. And for me, it's intense.
And it's just, I think it's a great point. I mean, you articulated it really, really well in that, there are different, there's different levels and different ways to approach, what I consider, fatigue resistance. Like that's something we talk a lot about in the pool, is that, we work, there's 3 different kind of breakdowns of swim sessions. There's form, there's fitness, and there's fatigue resistance. And you have to be very, very resistant to fatigue to hold your form for a long period of time. That's the same goes for swimming, the same goes for cycling, the same goes for running, right? At mile 20 of the marathon, if you're not in shape and you haven't paced very, very well, you didn't just forget how to have a good run stride, right? You just can't hold it any longer, right? Because your body is broken down so much, you just can't hold good run form. And so again, same thing with same thing with all the sports, same thing with running, same thing with cycling specifically, and obviously with swimming even more, because the more your form breakdown, you see a huge degradation in your ability to maintain speed, because it is so technical. It is such a technical sport. But like we said, like in cycling, you ask a person to go out and hold 200 watts even, right? Maybe that's their goal race pace, what they're going to do in training, like 200 watts even at 80 cadence, and there's only like 7 turns on course, like a course like Ironman Florida, but not 7, but like, maybe 10 or 12, they're going to start to feel like, and say, hey, go out and do it for 4 hours. And all they've been doing is 2.5, 3.5 hour rides of sporadic interval work, high cadence this, low cadence that, threshold here, 95 cadence at threshold, then you get easy spinning. Like, you don't have those really, really, really long, steady state efforts. And you ask them to go do 4 hours, high zone 2, purposeful. Your mind can't drift. There is no breakup. There is no interval. There is no rest. There is no cadence change. And it's really, really hard. It's to me, it's very similar. Is like why I love rolling courses versus like pancake flat run courses. There's no change in cadence. There's no change in the muscle groups you're recruiting, right? That's why I love, rolling courses, because there's a little bit of change, a little bit of undulation, quad dominant, hamstring dominant, going up, you're going down. You're able to recruit different muscles. You're doing a little bit of a change of pace. Like, you get the cadence change in the uphill, you get elongated stride, going downhill. It helps alleviate some of that. But if it's a pancake flat course, you get your lunch gets eaten. Same stride, same cadence, right? Same effort, same muscle groups getting predominantly worked. It's harder, right? And so again, like there's so many different ways in how we quantify, and I think how people describe and define, and maybe it's just how they hear it, right? So it's all relative, and how they hear intense. But like you said, that's an intense for you, and the same thing goes for kind of like, I got like 9 minutes here, but to go into like the next part of it is when we talk about intervals and how we approach them and what system are we trying to work, right? And if I said, one of our favorite runs is the Moneghetti run. Mm-hmm. And and one of the reasons I love it so much is because intervals are so short. You can run at a very, very high speed, but your heart rate, until you get to like the minute and a half, 2 minute, and then you work your way back down the ladder. But your heart rate doesn't have the time to drift up all the way to where it's really impacting form and speed. Oftentimes, you'll even see, like in the ladder end, you'll see your heart rate actually be higher during the rest interval. So if I said, Mike, and going to cycling, if I said, Mike, hop on your bike and do 45 seconds all out on 30 seconds rest, or maybe 45 and 15s, or 30s and 30s, or 20s and 40s, maybe the first 3 sets, you'd obviously see your peak heart rate at the very end of the hard interval. But as you move forward, and maybe you're doing like 20 sets of that at the 15 set to 20 set mark, you're going to actually find your higher heart rate in the beginning of the rest interval, because your heart rate takes so long to drift up to it, because it's such a short period of time that effort is so high. Your heart rate will be higher into the beginning part of your rest interval.
Yep.
And that's how you have to look at intervals in general, right? If I'm asking Mike, again, just speaking to how athletes look at the systems that they're working and the overall goal of the session is, I could tell them, all right, Mike, go out and I want you to do an hour and a half, hop on the bike, hour and a half. This is, you could use the same interval set for running. And I said, go out and I want you to do, 3 times 10 minutes, warm up, and then 3 times 10 minutes at zone 3 on 5 minutes recovery. So 30 minutes of work, 5 minutes recovery. It's 45 total minutes. Then I want you to cool down. And let's say that gives Mike, an average heart rate of, let's just keep it simple, 150. Okay. So 30 minutes of work, 15 to kind of recovery, and then we cool down. So 45 minutes technically of the main set, but only 30 minutes of work. Well, we were obviously working his zone 3, that gray zone that people call it, or the race pace zone. You're not getting, you're not doing much in terms of raising your threshold, but you're getting a long, sustained, again, to me, tempo work is the hardest, because it's hard enough to make you feel uncomfortable and like it takes effort to hold it, but it's not painful enough to where you can be like, I need to stop, because you just kind of sit with you like, damn it, I can hold this for a long time and it's gonna suck. But you're working that specific system. Having said that, if I went out maybe the week before that to prep Mike for that session, and I said, all right, instead of 30 minutes of work broken up into 3 10s, maybe I'm going to ask Mike instead, all right, Mike, today do the same warm up, but I want you to do 4 times 5 minutes at high, middle to zone 4, high zone 4, your threshold effort. But I want you to give a good 3 to 4 minute easy jog walk in between.
Okay.
Well, obviously when that threshold, he's going to have a much higher heart rate, but he's also going to have a lot longer of a rest, right? 3 times 10, as we talked about before, with tempo, 5 minutes easy. That's half rest, right? That's of the work to rest ratio. But then we're almost giving him equal rest. So his heart rate's going to come down longer for a long period of time. That might actually give him a lower heart rate over the entire workout. Maybe not the main set, but over the entire workout. But we worked his threshold, right? And then that equated to preparing him for a longer tempo set. Again, going back to the previous kind of topic we had, which was measuring stress. Those are also 2 fairly similar stress-related scenarios here. But one was a different intensity with a different work to rest ratio, and one was longer with less rest but lower intensity. And so it's you again as coaches, when you and I think especially as athletes that are making their own plan or trying to figure out what to do with interval training, what kind of intervals, what intensity. It's not nearly as simple, I think, as we try to make it sometimes. And because let's say I give Mike those 3 times 10 with a 5 minute rest, and he does what? He does great on it. Well, what do you do next time? Do you do 3 times 12 on 5 minutes, or do you give him an extra rest, do 4 by 10 on 5s, or do we do 3 by 10s on 3 minute rest? Three totally different scenarios. They're going to elicit a totally different response in how you incorporate the interval. How much time do you want the heart rate to lag to recover? Do you want it to recover? Right. And so I think that's, again, like when you look at your week and you're looking at, how you're balancing things with intensity or volume or intervals, you can't just throw things at a wall and see what sticks. But there's a lot of nuance into, how do you manipulate the intervals and the rest, or is it, is extend the interval, shorten the rest, right? Or add a rep. There's a lot of ways to skin that cat, just like there's different ways of interpreting and also implementing intensity. It could be a 4-hour ride or a 2.5-hour hard ride.
Yeah. Yeah. we can wrap it up, but what you're saying there is really kind of the baseline for how I unfortunately race. There's a lot of people, I'm not the best at that patience game and the endurance game. So I like to be real, with my races and my training and stuff like that. And I think about how, what you said about keeping that form over that long period of time and not having hilly, rollers or something like that. I just like those flat races really eat me up. So even in all three, I kind of look for opportunities to break it up, in the swim, and I got this from Emily. She'll like said, after 1,000 and the corner buoy, she'll take a few breaststrokes just to break cadence with that, zone 2-ish kind of repetitive nature. Same with on the bikes. I'll get out of the saddle occasionally and just kind of not super hard, but I'll like push myself just because I need those breaks. And on the run, that's why I do this run walk, man. I don't think I'm, I don't train in such a way that I'll be capable to just kind of slug out that marathon, really. I might be able to, but I'm looking for opportunities to break it and then decide at some point. That's always my goal, is to get to some point and be like, all right, now I know you can do this and finish it, but don't crash and burn too early.
We'll end it here, but what you just said is an example. I used it with you actually the other day when talking to someone about swimming, when they talk about run walking, as it pertains to swimming. And one of the things that I oftentimes get kind of beat up on as a coach is like, why am I doing these short intervals with all this rest? Like, I don't have time for this, right? And I'm like, well, but you don't have time for this, but what you're telling me is you've got plenty of time to hold really shitty form for a long period of time. That's what you have time for. Or you can spend a little bit less swim time with great form. Because again, it goes back down to fatigue resistance. If I'm at swimming, because swimming is the most technical, and then it goes to running, then it goes to cycling. Cycling is barely technical and we're stretching it there. And so with swimming, if you take long rest to make sure you can do it right, you're gaining strength in areas that you need to gain strength in to hold form for a longer period of time, which helps you maintain speed for a longer time. Same thing with running, right? Okay, well, go out and run. Last example, if I said, Mike, go out and run an hour and a half, but I knew based on the terrain, based on your current level of, just kind of your durability with running, I knew the last 20 minutes, you're going to struggle. Your form's going to break down. We're really probably doing more. It might feel zone 1, zone 2 heart rate, but it's going to feel like zone 4 impact on your joints, ligaments, tendons, and skeletal structure. But if I said, all right, man, go run 90 minutes, and I want you to run I want you 9 sets of 8 minutes perfect run form, 75, 80% effort to where you feel like a runner. The foot strike is where it needs to be. Your stride's how it needs to be. Your form is great. And then 2 minutes, I want you to walk super chill. Like, oh, I don't want to walk. Well, if you tally that up, you're only going to have 18 minutes of walking. But you're going to have an hour and 12 minutes of fantastic running, which guess what? Pretty similar to what the breakdown I gave before that. But you're not going to have perfect run in even up to an hour probably, because your mind's going to wander. You're going to break down a little bit more. And so again, like, when you think about, and again, running is the one where people get hurt the most because their form breaks down and they sacrifice because they want to get it done. I don't have time for this. I want to speed things up, and you get hurt. Right. So there's so many ways to, again, I could talk for 5 hours. I just don't have it in me today from a time standpoint. But there's a lot of ways, again, to look at your training, look at how to implement, ratios, rest, intervals, intensity, volume. And again, don't get stuck in the same patterns. And please just don't look at weeks with this, apples to apples view of what intensity and quantity and quality and volume and all these things are defined as. There's a lot of ways to define them, a lot of ways to implement them.
Yeah.
Just like today, sprint interval, 30 minutes in the can.
Yep. I can't even hold sleep form all night, let alone run form.
I can't either, man. Apologies for the short cast, but you know what? We got it done. That's all we had time for. With little, but you know what? We made it happen. As always, love you guys. We appreciate you. I'll be back later this week. And we'll talk a little bit more about Louisville 70.3. Go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It's our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you need anything from Mike, he's available. Mike at c26triathlon.com. If you need anything from me, Robbie at c26triathlon.com.
All right, the hit cast is in the books.
Bam, done. See you, dude.
See you, man.